start. So welcome to Thinking Big and Being Bold, Plans for a Healthier City. We've got three distinguished panelists this morning, and the idea is really to keep it quite informal. We live in extraordinary times, so we're obviously going to have to touch on that. It sets the context for everything, and the plan is really just to kind of let the panel work their way through a few of the issues. I know that there'll be, if you've got questions, you can post them. Hopefully, Alex, someone will collate those. I'll try and keep an eye on them from here, and we'll look to just kind of move it through and keep it nice and informal, and hopefully give you a really good idea of what's happening in the NHS, what's been happening in certain terms of a major development for Liverpool, and also then hopefully some of the opportunities that are really starting to emerge from circumstances that none of us would have chosen to live in. So I suppose I should introduce myself first of all. So I'm Mike Gibney, I'm the Director of Workforce and Innovation at the Walton Centre, and that's all you need to know about me. But our three panellists are Liz Bishop, Carlo Palmieri and Peter Moore. So I'm going, because I'm so lazy, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and you can get an idea of who they are. If we could start with you, Liz, that would be brilliant.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm Liz Bishop and I'm Chief Executive at the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre. I've been here for nearly 2 years. And just to give you a bit of my background, I joined the NHS in 1982 and I worked for the last 32 years in London, largely in Guy's and Tommy's Hospital and the Royal Marsden. But you can hear from my accent, I'm from the proper north and I call this the middle. But I'll hand over to Carlo to introduce himself.
Okay, from somebody from the middle to a southerner. So I'm Carlo Palmieri, I'm an academic medical oncologist. My interests are breast cancer, so I treat nothing but women and men with breast cancer, so I do clinical work and research. Originally, I was down in London, so I'm a Cockney, as you'd say up here. Been here for 7 years and love to be on the panel. Good morning.
Thank you. And Peter, who are you?
Well, you want to talk accents that are messed up, mate. Scouser born and bred, don't sound like it. Left Liverpool in actually the mid-60s to move to North Wales. Left North Wales in 1980 to move to America, from which I thought I would never return until I was offered the role of CEO of Liverpool Football Club 4 years ago now. And up until September 1st, I was the CEO of Liverpool Football Club for the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was in video games for 20 years with Electronic Arts, where I was the chief operating officer. And I ran the Xbox business prior to that for Bill Gates, living in Seattle. And I was president of Sega prior to that. And then a career in sporting goods at Reebok for a decade in Boston, Massachusetts. So, but it's been a delight to come back here to Liverpool. And it's been quite a 3 seasons that we've had as a football club, and both on and off the pitch. But it's been also a pleasure for me to reacquaint myself with this magnificent city and its people, and give back a little bit, not only at the club, but to the community.
Okay, thank you. So I think you'll agree, quite a plausible panel at this stage. So let's see how it goes. So I thought we'd start. So the last time that we had an event that involved Liz, we were at the point where we were talking about the big investment in the new hospital and you know what the ambitions were, and we were looking forward to it opening. And I think it was a week or two before you actually moved across and moved in. So I thought we'd start with Liz, really sort of giving us some idea of how that's gone as a major investment and how that's working. And obviously the fact is that obviously, you know, they've moved into the new hospital at a time where there's been a number of rather obvious challenges. So Liz, perhaps you could sort of kick us off with a sense of how that's going.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike, and it's great to have this opportunity to share experiences. But yeah, we've been a bit busy, that's fair to say. But just to refresh, you know, the new hospital, which is what we're talking about today, was part of a £162 million investment that's gone back for sort of 5 years in the making. And it's, you know, the last year has been the intense period of getting it open and up and running. So just to recap, the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre has been on the Wirral for 60 years. But a few years ago, the decision was made to move the base into Liverpool, the heart of the city, because 68% of our patients were travelling south of the river to come for cancer treatment. It was the logical place to move it, to co-locate with the acute services of the Royal, and to co-locate with the university to facilitate cancer research. So the decision had been made, the business case had been approved, and it was all systems go to get that open. Now, we had been on track to open on time and budget, and then of course COVID came along, and that added another challenge to what we'd already had planned. So at the point of at the peak earlier in the year, we'd gone from 350 contractors to, there was one day where we actually had no contractors on site. And, we had the support of NHS England to get open on time, because remember, we were always told there'd be a second peak. So we had this window of opportunity to get it open in June. And I recall sitting down with the Lang O'Rourke, our contractor, saying, no, we must open. We cannot waver here. We must get this open. And, they were fantastic. They got more contractors back on site. We never got, quite back up to the number we were pre-COVID. Every business has been hit, and the construction industry was no different. And we got back up to 250 contractors on site. So we worked with them closely, and it was a little bit delayed in terms of getting the bricks and mortar finished. And then we said to our teams, look, instead of having 12 weeks to commission this building, let's do it in 4. And it was a bold decision to make. We were talking about bold decisions, but we had the confidence in the team to pull that off. And, we opened successfully on the 27th of June. We've been able to, we're so glad we did open, because we've been able to help the system, additional imaging, diagnostics for the people of Liverpool, who are coming back into the system and having confidence to come back into the system. So, it's really been a tough but very motivating journey that we've been on. And, thanks to everyone involved, it was a huge team effort, and, we did it. So that's it in summary. I mean, we treat 35,000 patients a year across Cheshire and Merseyside. So it was also around, that gives you an idea of the scale, but, the bulk of the patients came from Liverpool, and this was the right place to be. So that's where we are, Mike.
Thank you. So Carlo, or indeed Professor Carlo Palmieri, to give you your full title. So how are you finding how are you finding the new facility? And I suppose really, could you talk a little bit more about, clearly COVID provided a number of challenges, but clearly some opportunities, certainly with our audiences, the local business community. Perhaps you could talk a little bit more about how you've engaged with business.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. So I think having the new hospital in the centre of town is, revolutionary. I think it's nothing short of a medical revolution for Liverpool, for the citizens of Liverpool and the wider area, and also for our national and international colleagues, because we can make a bigger impact to the wider community, society, with regard to cancer, not just for our own population, but for others outside of the city, because that's what we're ultimately about. So the hospital is beautiful. Unfortunately, given COVID, the people can't come in to see it, but it's a beautiful building. I was on call the second weekend. Everybody has their own room, own bathroom, big corridors, long corridors. It's an amazing building. Architecturally, art going around left, right, and centre. Liz is getting art from all these famous artists. She obviously has got a big gold credit card, getting all the art in. For instance, personally for me now, I can leave my office here, which I'm sat in the university. My patients are 5 minutes walk away from me. I get out of the office, cross the road, and within 2 minutes, I'm on a ward seeing a patient. So it means that, you know, I can be on a call now, and in an hour I can be at the bedside seeing my patients if I need to. So it means that, you know, personally for me, it's made it easier looking after my patients. I can be there when I need to. I don't need to have a specific time to go and see them. Turning to COVID, we'll turn to research probably a bit later. It has been a massive challenge for the NHS, for you and Liz and the management side, and for us on the medical side. You know, when the first wave hit, we did not know what was coming. It was almost like entering a battle. We knew we had an enemy. We really didn't know much about the enemy, and we didn't know what was going to happen. So we rapidly had to come up with nothing short of a battle plan to think about how we're going to look after our patients, keep them safe, and deliver effective treatment. I mean, there's nothing worse in medicine in delivering poor treatment, you know, and inadequate treatment. And what we are about at Clatterbridge is delivering the best treatment. And what we're faced with was trying to deliver some of the best treatments in some of the worst circumstances. So what did that mean? That means we rapidly had to think about how we treat our patients, how we saw them. The classical model in hospitals is seeing patients and outpatients face to face. Clearly, given the challenges with COVID, how it spread, and our particularly susceptible population on chemotherapy, radiotherapy, immunotherapy that potentially put them at increased risk of acquiring COVID and potentially dying from COVID if they got it, we had to protect them. So that meant telephone consultations. That meant sending medicines out by car. You know, the city helped the hospital by people coming forward as volunteer drivers to drive medicines to patients who are vulnerable and shielding. So the community helped the hospital. Again, Liverpool at its best, Merseyside, we're all at its best. We had to think about, actually, for some patients, the potential benefits of treatment, if we should modify their treatments and happen in a small proportion. We had to obviously, you know, see our patients less face-to-face, video consultation, and only get them into hospital if they needed a treatment. And we had to obviously less visitors. So that was a big impact for our patients, was the fact that if you're now sick in our hospitals, it's very difficult having visitors. And, you know, 6 months ago, if I saw a woman with breast cancer in my clinic, not uncommonly, she would have 4 or 5 family members present, speaking to the social integration and the clear social fabric of this city and the sort of family structures within the city, which is great. Suddenly, maybe sometimes these women had to come on their own. So clearly, the support for some patients in clinic was much more difficult. So we faced real challenges, but actually, as you know, in your own hospitals, we changed and we've actually provided good care. Our care actually stayed excellent. In fact, we've innovated in innovations that will carry on. It's also provided the impetus for research. So again, this is where sometimes serendipity and luck and basically a crisis creates opportunities and therefore, drives knowledge forward. So normally I only mix with my own kind. So normally I mix with breast oncologists and surgeons. So I don't get out much to see other people. So suddenly this infection comes along. It affects my patients potentially badly. We know that cancer patients do unfortunately suffer worse with COVID. So I think to myself, we've got some of the world experts in COVID medicine in our university. So the key chap who's on BBC News at 7:30 this morning, Callum Semple, is a colleague at the university. We've linked up with them to basically design probably the largest global study of cancer and COVID and cancer patients in the world. So we've got probably the largest data set. We've presented it once, presenting again later in November. Our aim is to say, what cancer patients are at risk of COVID, so which patients don't need to shield and can basically carry on with their normal societal interactions, which patients are at the greatest risk and need greater protection, and actually probably increased measures above and beyond what we provide at the moment. And actually, are there treatments which actually may put patients at less risk? And we know from data already published that potentially men with prostate cancer have less risk of dying from COVID, even though they're men, and men do bad with COVID. And actually, which patients might be at increased risk? We know probably patients with blood cancers are probably at slightly increased risk or more risk because of the effect on the immune system. So the aim is actually not only to look after our patients in this city by this research, but also inform others globally around how to help. So we think about our own local population, but also in our research, we think more broadly, nationally and internationally.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. And I think we will come back. I think it'll be of particular interest to our audience to talk about some of the innovation, really, because I do think that some of the way that clinics and things are run will change forever, really, post-COVID. So we'll look at that in a minute. So I was going to go over to Peter. So Peter, so maybe we could perhaps just talk, because I understand you've got some connections with Clatterbridge and foundation supported. So perhaps we could start by talking a little bit about that and why you felt the need to support Clatterbridge.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, as I mentioned in my opening, I've been gone a long time. I think I left Liverpool in 1963 and moved away. I'm a wool, North Wales. And when I came back, and as I started to come back, and I would fly over to watch the team play from time to time, I was stunned at the rebirth of what Liverpool has gone through, particularly since Capital Culture in 2008. But one of the things that struck me is that the people were still struggling from the same issues of when I lived here: lifestyle issues, alcohol, smoking, obesity, social isolation is becoming a big thing as well. So what I decided to do in conjunction with my wife is, I've done okay in my life and I can afford to fund my own foundation, which I was able to do, and look at the issues that Liverpool and the people of Liverpool were facing. I'm so honored that my mother was a nurse at Alder Hospital post-World War II. And so I got deeply involved with Alder Hey, which is a jewel in the crown for Merseyside around the world, as the ability to treat children. 275,000 children a year go through Alder Hey Hospital. But having then met Liz over here on the Wirral and going through some of the issues that we were facing as a society, as a community, it's very clear to me, and also talking to Kenny and Marina Dalglish about their support, in particular of breast cancer and what needed to do here. With a 50% cancer rate, it was critical to me to try to get involved and to try to help through my foundation, building not for this generation, bluntly, for the next generation. As I've learned in my life, education, and been able actually to sit and listen to Bill Gates about what he and Melinda Gates did to build the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which kind of was the impetus for me. Now mine's 1/10 of 1/1,000,000th of what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is. But Bill always said, I'm not doing it for this generation, I'm doing it for the next, whether it's trying to cure malaria or make sure no child in Africa is ever born with AIDS again. It is really paying it forward here. So what I think is critical here is not only the stuff that Carlo does as regards treating people right now with breast cancer, but is educating people for the next generation about what we as a community can possibly do to forestall that, and lifestyle issues, making sure that people understand why there's a greater propensity here on Merseyside for cancer, making sure that we as a community rally around that. So I was fortunate enough to be able to fund a teenage bedroom where chemotherapy is delivered, and was very proud to be able to have a quick visit recently to that, as well as a couple of visits to the hospital now, which is absolutely magnificent. But as a community, and in particular as a business community, the way that I have seen Alder Hey benefit here on Merseyside, we need to do the same for Clatterbridge. We absolutely need to embrace the fact that we've got to change beliefs, lifestyles, our culture, and we're going through it right now with COVID. And I could talk about that as regards how our football club managed that in the last 6 months. Life will never be the same. We're all going to be doing this more and more often. Face-to-face meetings have proved for all of us that have done these over the last 6-7 months to be less efficient. We get more done, we're more productive. But with lifestyle changes comes mental health issues. Are we going to be less active as a result because we're stood here 9-10 hours a day, or sat here 9-10 hours a day? I stand up because I find it's healthier for me. I don't want to sit, which I think the future is, in front of a camera like this. And what we can do to be able to support this city. When I first arrived at Liverpool Football Club, it's very clear to me that we were driving massive community and financial benefit to the city of Liverpool. I commissioned a report with an economic impact report with Deloitte that would indicate, this is 2 years ago now, that £494 million dropped to the bottom line because of Liverpool Football Club visitors, restaurants, transportation, hotels, return visits to this great city here. And so the financial benefit was clear. As somebody that's worked for massive companies like Microsoft, like Electronic Arts, like Reebok, and as an employer, I know that a healthy workforce is critical to the bottom line. Certainly when you work in America, you're pretty much paying the fees and the subsidies for healthcare. At Microsoft alone, it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And it was very clear to me, and we were educated as senior executives, that having a healthier workforce was so much better for the bottom line, because people weren't off work as often. Their mental health was better. So what we need to do as a community, as a business community, is rally around Clatterbridge, rally around major institutions like this into the city. Again, not necessarily for the generation we're in right now, but for the next generation going forward here. And I'm fortunate to play a teeny part of that. The football club plays a huge part in the mental health, the red side of this football city anyway, and the blue side's coming up as well. On the brink of a Merseyside derby, I'll throw that in. But, you know, the importance of what good mental health, good physical health, good medical health means to the resounding resilience of the people of Liverpool, as we're seeing right now with COVID. And with COVID as a football club, you know, to the previous comments of Liz and Carlo here, we had to rally around our people. Went through a sticky period of furlough or not to furlough, which many of you, I'm sure, think shows in the end that we were going to just start writing checks for thousands of people and getting them through, even non-employees, casual staff that rely on match day income here. The football club continues to lose millions of pounds a week. And you're going through, this week has been a great news cycle for how massive changes going through what we're going through right now with the quote unquote project big picture presentation about massive restructuring for the future here. I'm not going to get into that for obvious reasons, but I think, you know, as somebody once said, never waste a good crisis. And I think that's where we're at right now. What can we do to actually take advantage of what's going on right now and prepare ourselves for the future?
Brilliant, thank you. I think that leads us kind of really nicely back to you, Liz, really, in terms of, I suppose, a period of unprecedented change. And also that kind of, I suppose, where Peter's taking us is that, so if something like Clatterbridge is a resource that we all value and want, and hopefully the business community cherish, you know, so perhaps we could talk a little bit more about some of the lifestyle issues that are leading through into the trust, and maybe also, I suppose, also the fact that having a bright, spanking new, freshly designed hospital, hopefully that's having a well-being benefit for staff and patients alike, really.
Yeah, so you know, I think it's fair to say that we've been diverted a bit by COVID, but I don't think we should lose sight of the vision and the grand plan for the city and the city's health, as Peter described. I mean, if you just go back to the cancer health, if you like, of the city, you know, looking at some of the outcomes, particularly things like lung cancer, head and neck cancer, you know, related to smoking, alcoholism, and addiction, you know, the obesity that Peter mentioned as well, that, you know, clearly the city's health could improve. And that is the vision and the aim of the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre, for us to do our bit for the city's health, because health is related to wealth, as Peter described. So, you know, also, you know, we had some of the worst outcomes in Liverpool compared to the rest of England in, say, lung cancer. So, you know, the bricks and mortar have been delivered and delivered to a high spec. You know, we've also, so the healing nature of the building, the architects took all of that into account. The thing I didn't mention, of course, is that all the rooms are single rooms, which is a bonus when there's a pandemic on. Our patients can be kept safe. And we've modified the way we've, you know, delivered treatment very quickly, as Carlo said, you know, using volunteers, 90% remote consultations, you know, to keep patients safe. I even made my husband volunteer, you know, to help the system. I got me out of bed, that was good. So, you know, that coming together is really important. But the long-term vision is about getting the people in to do the research, more Carlos, if you like. And already people are wanting to come to the city. We've made some fantastic consultant academic appointments. You know, a guy flew in from Oslo that we appointed, and he said, Liz, this is like MD Anderson. He said, in MD Anderson in Texas, if anyone knows, it's the biggest, brightest, shiniest cancer centre in the world. We're on a smaller scale, but that was his impression of the spec and the building for patients. So it's, you know, and when patients need it the most, they can come to that great environment. But this is about pulling in more Carlos, if you like, to do more research, because yes, we want the very best care and treatment for patients of the here and now, but we won't have an impact on the health of the city unless we do the work that Carlo described. And we need more people to do that. And the building, the city, you know, I can't tell you how Peter met one of our consultants when he came round, and he came to the UK because of Liverpool Football Club, you know, and I can't tell you how many consultants, particularly some from abroad, you know, do say we're football fans as well as wanting to do great medicine, you know, so that, and there's a certain vibe about the city, I think. I feel it is. It's a wee bit like Glasgow, I think. You know, but good fighting spirit. You know, crisis can bring out the worst and the best, and I'm ever optimistic that the best will come out of this. But we've been derailed, but we're firmly clear of our plans, and we need that support of you know, we've had the Peter Moore Foundation supporting us, our charity, you know, because you know, we don't want to just rely on NHS funding to support our research and our future equipment and facilities. If we want state-of-the-art facilities to improve outcomes, then, you know, we need that support. So I'll pause there because I'm sure Carlo's itching to say more, but
you're the boss, Liz.
Yes, that's true. I'm glad you know it, Carlo.
My life is run by women.
Steady, Carlo. So I was just going to say, so because of course, Liz, that's brilliant to hear, because actually when we last spoke, that was one of your key ambitions, was to try and use the new hospital to attract in as much talent as you could, really. So that really is you know, a fantastic achievement. So Carlo, just kind of, if you, obviously Liz has kind of thrown the ball to you there. If you talk a little bit about research, but in a general sense to a business audience, but also that, so it's the importance of it, but also the kind of the way that business can be involved, because I'm conscious that certainly in my hospital, research is one of those areas where we're dealing with the private sector all the time.
So I mean, I'm dealing with the private sector constantly with pharma companies. They're normally big companies. So what do we do with regard to business? I mean, firstly, clearly, what I'm interested in is trying to make either better treatments or less treatments. So my interest in breast cancer. So I'm in my office. Over my shoulders, you'll see a photograph of a woman who's had a mastectomy. It's by an Argentinian photographer whose wife had breast cancer during pregnancy.
You need to move your head a little bit so we can see it.
Well, that's one photograph of a series of 30 photographs of an Argentinian photographer. I've been trying to get them up here for a show, but well, that's another story. So that photograph is in my office for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's to remind me that that women undergo essentially aggressive treatment, mastectomy. I want women not to have their breast removed because of breast cancer. It reminds me that that's a side effect of treatment. There's that kind of surgery. That secondly, the breast cancer in the breast doesn't kill the patient. So patients can have the breast removed or the lump removed. It's the cancer cells that exit the breast that go to other organs that kill. So we want gentler treatment, so treatments that some women don't need if they've got less aggressive breast cancer. So how do we identify women who don't need treatment? So we don't give them the treatment so they can go back to work, or have gentler treatments, and identify those breast cancers actually might need a bit more aggressive treatment so those women don't die from their disease. Because ultimately, our job, you treat lung cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, is to make sure patients live longer and our survival rates go up. That means we have to engage with industry, pharma companies to get compounds. So if I want to move things forward, it often means getting the latest compounds, which are by and large held by pharmaceutical companies. That means I have to have good relationships, be able to sell ideas. It's a bit like having a football team. You need to have a good team that has different strengths. that you can then put forward to say, actually, give us your compounds. We've got the team to deliver the study or the idea to get the result, which is basically equivalent to goals, that actually shows the drug works and moves it forward and makes it ultimately a difference to patients. I mean, I have no shareholders except my patients. So my aim is not to sell companies drugs. My aim is to use their drugs for the betterment of my patients and other people's patients. In the local region, clearly, we have SME, small companies that are involved in biotech and developing innovative either systems or devices, and the university also liaises with them. And clearly, I used to be able to get people up to Liverpool to show round and to have meetings. Clearly, COVID has nailed that on the head. So I used to like to take people to some of the nice restaurants and bars in the city and showcase some of the culture. I mean, Liverpool has got lovely museums. I was about to put on a big event in the Museum of Liverpool for patients with breast cancer in this month. That got screwed up by COVID. So the idea was to get lots of women with breast cancer, living with breast cancer, into Liverpool a couple of nights and get an event going, again, to showcase the city. So again, I think Clatterbridge has a wider responsibility. We do input into the economic activity of the city. So every time somebody gives me money for a grant or an idea, or from either a charitable source, a national funding body, or a pharmaceutical company, that generally results in a wage in the city and pays somebody to work. So we should also see Clatterbridge as an economic vehicle for bringing in money into the city. So when I or my colleagues get money for a grant, for a study, it normally results in somebody getting a wage in the city. So we are important for that as well, and that we do contribute. We don't, as an NHS, just suck taxes in. We actually also give back by bringing money in. So we should also remember that actually we do provide that. So support for Clatterbridge also means you're bringing economic activity in the city, which is really important, man. We are facing a real economic challenge. So I feel it's partly our responsibility to try to give something back to the city as well, in ensuring that we keep some people in jobs and we bring further investment into the city. So, when I go and see companies and tout for studies and say, this is my idea, if I'm successful, the city's successful, not just me. So I think we should also remember that as well, I think, and hopefully contribute to the city wider, not just the medical, but a society level, economic level.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carla. And I think that's an important point around that. We can often think that there are silos. There aren't. There is, in this case, I mean, the way Pete's talked about it's just Liverpool, isn't it? And how do we work together to improve it? I suppose, Peter, Carlo's kind of really introduced the extent of the economic challenge that runs alongside of COVID. And I wondered, with your business experience and just your connection with the city, and and Liverpool Football Club is a fundamental part of the city. Just kind of without depressing us all, but so we've got a considerable challenge, and perhaps some thoughts on how we start to get out of it and capitalize on it. And to quote yourself, back to yourself, not to waste a good crisis. Is there an opportunity in this?
Yeah, there always is. I think life will never be the same. Let's put that right and nail that down. We will never pre-COVID go back to pre-COVID days of massive office buildings, people showing up for work, commuting back into sitting in conference rooms. We've learned technology. We've learned how to interact with each other utilizing technology. We've learned how to be more productive. But with that, as I say, I do worry about the knock-on effect of what that means as well. But coming out of COVID, once we, particularly here in Liverpool, come out of our tier 3 status, I think that as a business community, that we need to rally around each other, around this very unique city with very unique people, and figure out how we can turn this to our advantage, how we can continue to grow this city in the eyes of both its community and the global community, and having a medical facilities that can take care of people. But I keep pushing on this point, educate people. I think Liz and Carla would say they'd rather not see anybody ultimately, because, and that's never unfortunately going to happen, but the more that we can educate, the more that we can understand what are the causes, particularly here in Liverpool, for the advanced cancer rates we have, the better off we're going to be. And as a business community, I think we have an absolute obligation to support that. Again, it might not be in your tenure for your companies, but your successors will thank you for a healthier workforce, for, to Carlo's point, a city, and to Liz's point, a city that can attract the best. We've attracted as a football club the best players in the world. How can we as a city overall, and how can Clatterbridge in particular, attract the best oncologists, the best radiotherapists, all of that to this magnificent city? I had the honor, excuse me, of living in Boston for 9 years in a hospital like Brigham and Women's and Mass General. This was, if you live in Boston, you understand the value that those hospitals, not only to the local people of the city of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but worldwide. And I think we have an opportunity to be seen in the global medical map that way. We have Alder Hey, which I've talked about, and trust me, as an outsider, you have no idea how far that brand and that reputation goes around the world of one of the top treatment centers for children, not just here in the UK, but everybody that I speak to in the medical field, certainly in America, oh, that's where Alder Hey is. And we've got to get there, I think, with Clatterbridge as well. But from my perspective, yeah, COVID has knocked us on our rear ends, bluntly. And what we need to do is figure out when we pick ourselves up, which we do as a city, dust ourselves off, what are the lessons we've learned? It's like getting beaten a football match. The loss is only bad if you don't learn anything from it. And I'm not going to get into 7-2 at Aston Villa, but Jurgen did say, this will teach us things. And, you know, said if it doesn't, then it's a real tragedy that we've lost. But if we learn from something and don't lose again in that manner, then it was worth it. So from that perspective, what will we learn from COVID? How it will help us understand people? And Carlo will probably tell you, we're diving into people right now and figuring out different ways of treating them. And COVID, you know, as somebody that watches CNN because of what we're in as regards, you know, as an American citizen here in an election period, and listening to people like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Derek Burks, I think we're all closet epidemiologists at this point. We've all got our views on this stuff here, but it has shone a bright spotlight on the health of the world and what we need to do to be able to improve people's lifestyle. So I think, you know, in a message to the business community, you want a healthy, vibrant, wealthy city. You've got to invest and support places that help you get there. And that is hospitals, medical facilities, rehab centers, physical therapy, all of those things that help bring the city back on its feet here. And Clatterbridge is the jewel in the crown right now for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. I suppose that leads us naturally, Liz, towards looking a bit more towards the future. So I know it's very early days with the new hospital, with the state-of-the-art facility, but then perhaps something about, we could say something about the longer term vision, really, because obviously the hospital was one step to what, you know, in the chain of having a vision for Clatterbridge. And the fact that, so Liverpool has a number of specialist trusts, which kind of almost ironically make it a very good place to get ill, actually, because we've got this kind of, you know, massive infrastructure. But, you know, if we can't carry on on that trajectory and, you know, increase the brand internationally, you know, we probably will get left behind. I didn't know if you had some thoughts on that, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all our other partners that we work with, and we work with, you know, we work across prevention right through to treatment, cure, and living beyond cancer. So we work with all partners across healthcare partners and other hospitals. The thing that COVID has done is brought us all together in a really strong way. If I could just, before I just move on to aspiration, we've just had a message from one of our patients who's in Ward 5 at the moment. And hi to you. I don't want to say your name in case I, you know, patient confidence and all that. But if I just read it out, and this is a great thing about the technology that's come out of COVID, so our patients can talk to us on this meeting. And he's just said, hi all, sorry to burden you all, and you're not a burden at all. He said, I'm an inpatient on Ward 5 awaiting chemotherapy for bone marrow transplant, just listening in. Firstly, you should all be so proud of a fantastic hospital. It's truly amazing, and your staff are on another planet for care and professionalism. Thank you. So thank you so much for taking the time to write that. I think that says it all, because our best feedback is from our patients, and we don't always get it right. So that thing that Peter said about learning from his defeat the other day, sorry Peter, you mentioned it, I didn't. So, you know, it's about learning from things when things don't go right. And one of the hard things I think for patients has been, you know, the sense of isolation. And, you know, that patient is in having a bone marrow transplant. He's in isolation for, you know, 4 weeks plus. It's really, really tough for him. And, you know, we've got great facilities. It's great to hear the feedback about the staff. But we had an equally so the other night, we had a desperate call from a patient saying, you know, I'm so lonely, I need to see my mom, you know, and I'm ready to discharge myself. You know, so we went to see her and see what we could do to wrap around her to make sure that she, you know, she would continue with her treatment. So we must never lose that personal touch. And, you know, as you said, it's you know, we wish we didn't have to do this to patients. It's the only business I can think of that we wish we were out of business, as you said. And, you know, we're very businesslike. We're a big machine and industry, and we have to make ourselves, you know, excellence at the heart of everything we do. But, you know, there's a message from a patient that says it all, really. And that's what we aspire to. Now, going back to your aspirations and the patients of the future, you know, that is really about galvanising the talent in the city, bringing in the pharma, because it is the talent, it's the Carlos that bring in the pharma. It's the Carlos that create a reputation. That means that we continue on that cycle of excellence and going forward. So I won't say much more there unless Carlo wants to say more, but I've got another question here. Can I take that, Mike? Or do you want to?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the next question is, how do your NHS trusts collaborate and share ideas? We support Alderhay and some great things going on there. Liz, how do we share our learning? Well, the one thing I found about coming to this sector from London was that, going back to the Peter's comments and about the spirit of the city, is that there is this, you know, it's a very friendly, collegiate health environment to work in. I work very closely with the specialist trusts. We share our innovations. We do some collaborative research. Carlo may want to talk about that. You know, where, you know, lung research with heart and chest hospital, etc. You know, we can't work in silos, as Carlo said. We have to work in collaboration with our other partners. And I think that's seen a sea change through COVID as well. So I'll stop there and see if Carlo or Peter want to say any more on that.
Carlo?
Yeah, so first I just want to make the point, we should acknowledge the leadership in the city. So people like Liz, the CEOs around the city, we have, from a medical leadership point of view, leadership that is visible, that is approachable. So, you know, I have Wednesday morning clinics. I often come in early and bump into Liz. So, you know, very approachable, you know, and lead by example. So I think because that's very important, because if you have dysfunctional leadership, then everything below it is a mess. So we've got good lead. I'm not saying that just because she's on the call and she's my, you know, CEO. It is true. We have. She might get a video from Prince Charles. So that is really important to acknowledge, that the leadership across the trust is visible, accessible, not snotty. They're not up their own bums. You know, very, very good, and that's important because that trickles down. I think working across the trust is really important, because we can quite easily fall into silos and not communicate. Now, the cross connectivity between trusts is really important for treating patients and for research. So I'll give you one example from the clinical setting and one example from the research setting. So earlier this year, we had an extremely sick young woman who presented with very nasty breast cancer that spread. I won't go into the details of confidentiality. One of the most challenging cases I've faced in my career. that required the input of 3 extra trusts, required the input of a total of 4 hospitals. She was treated by 4 separate trusts, required emergency surgery at one point to save her life. And that was the city and the health service at its best for that one patient and her family. And it meant that she eventually went home, and she's on treatment now and she's doing very well. So that's an example. On the research side, I work very closely with Michael Jenkinson at Walton, who you know very well. So working on brain disease. I mean, one of the biggest problems in breast cancer at the moment is our women with secondary breast cancer are living much longer. They're getting nasty disease that spreads to their brain. So we need to do better treatments, because as our patients live longer, this is going to become a much more common problem, and we need to be able to treat it so it no longer, potentially limits their lives or causes them to be unable to walk, talk, and have all of these issues. And that means working with your specialist trust and with neurologists. That's a good example of, and we've got grants together. So we've been co-applicants. So we've formed a football team, as I said before, and we've moved forward together. So that working across the cities is seen both for our patients and in our research, and that's really important. And generally, we work very well together. Clearly, there's always sometimes a little tension, a little competition, but above all, we work as a team across the trust, and it delivers for our patients and for our research.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think there's a couple of things that in that, Peter, as we kind of come to you. One is perhaps something around collaboration, and I think you've already talked about breaking down barriers with industry. But of course, Carlo introduced the magic word leadership into it. And perhaps you could say something about that, because I think leaders do set the culture and create the conditions in which this either happens or it doesn't. So I didn't know if you could pick that one up, really.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've started to do in this city is leaders in times of crisis start to pop up, and you see people from all walks of life, whether it's civic, whether it's the business and economic community, whether it's the corporate social responsibility community. We're seeing people pop up all over the place. One of the things that we got involved in, my wife and I, very early, is supporting food banks. I was stunned when I came back to Liverpool that food banks were a thing, that thousands of people in this world today, in this country, in this region, could not put a meal on the table for their families. And I have seen great examples of leadership in doing so. And I've been honored to be able to get involved in supporting a thing called Fan Supporting Food Banks, which brings the red and blue side of the city together. And at Goodison Park and Anfield, when we could do, would collect thousands of kilos of food from match-going supporters, because they rallied around the people who were less fortunate than them. And 2 leaders, Ian Byrne and Dave Kelly, from the red and blue side of the city. Ian is our MP, as many people know. I think he's your MP up there, Mike, in the Walton area here. This is, I think, the spirit of Liverpool here. And it just shows what we can do as an overall community. The great example we use at Liverpool Football Club, which has gone on for nearly 2 decades, is every Christmas taking the entire team and the manager to Alder Hey Hospital. Two things: A, to shine a bright light on the great work that hospital does, and I think as well to show young footballers who live a very treasured life what the reality is on the other side here. And in the 3 years that I was at the club and talking to players afterwards, it humbles them. It grounds them. It makes them understand how fortunate they are. And I think we all need to do that. So my message to people on this call, if you have a business or you have a community that you're leading, is to look at the long-term impact, the positive long-term impact that supporting a hospital like Clatterbridge can do, in the same way that many of you have supported Alder Hey and made it what it is and made this city what it is as a result here. And that shows leadership. There's so many great examples in this city of people who have stood up and been counted and have left a lasting impact. And I'm sure there's a great opportunity for many people on this call to do the same thing.
Thank you. And Liz, if I come back, there's of course, as always happens, the nearer we get to the end, the more the questions come in. There's a couple really, and one that an issue that Peter kind of raised. From an anonymous attendee, how have you managed the issue around patients being unable to have visitors to support their mental health, which has been a big challenge across the NHS? And in amongst all of that, again, lots of praise for Clatterbridge, but perhaps that you know, it's a really isolating time, isn't it? When, you know, we've got big signs around our trust saying, you know, no visitors allowed. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about that and its impact and how you've responded.
So, you know, clearly there has to be restrictions on visitors, you know, to keep patients safe. But the guidance does allow you to take bespoke decisions for patients, and you know, we try and make those adjustments for those patients where it's appropriate and safe to do so. I think the other thing is it's about our people, you know, our staff, and the relationship between the patients and the staff. Because when you're coming for, as one of our patients has said on the chat room here, 10 sessions, they start to build relationships with people and the staff, and have trust, not only the trust and confidence that they're getting the right treatment by experts, but actually they begin to, you know, there's a very strong personal relationship is developed over that period of treatment time. You know, very few patients just come once. You know, they come many, many times, some over many years and some for the rest of their lives. So you do not underestimate the importance of those relationships. And, you know, as I said, we're a big business, but we must not lose sight of that personal relationship. And I'm sure it's the same in all industries. You know, I had the good fortune of training as a nurse, and I worked as a sister for 4 years, and I was only ever as good as my team. And, you know, what I could see in my team was they were building strong relationships with patients, but it wasn't about me as an individual or Carlo. I'm sure Peter would say the same. It's about that chemistry. It's about building successful teams in different pockets of the hospital to support those patients. And I think that's something our teams do well. As I said, we're not complacent, and we'll always try. I've forgotten your original question now because I'm trying to read the things in the box at the same time. One of the patients, however, did say, Peter, he's a Tottenham fan. You know, so very sorry about that, but we treat, I suppose that shows we treat everyone irrespective of who they are and where they come from.
For being a Tottenham fan, I think it's a lifelong infliction. I don't think there's any.
I think you should share at that point, I'm from Tottenham, but
no. So we, you know, there's a lot in the media just now about the growing social divide. The great thing about working for the NHS is, you know, we don't judge people, and we treat everyone the same, irrespective, well, not the same, hopefully it's tailored, but irrespective of their background, who they are and where they come from. You know, and that is so important, that philosophy of openness, inclusivity. It's certainly something we try and promote in our hospital, because that's the way we treat our patients. So, you know, for our people and staff, it should be exactly the same. And, you know, I think that's another positive thing that hopefully will come out of the last 6 months of not, you know, which has been really difficult. But I'm ever an optimist and want to see the good that comes out of the current situation. But I'm aware we've only got a few minutes left, and I'll hand over to the boys.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Liz. So I suppose the last two. So Carlo, so the original question was really around mental health, and it has been a, you know, Peter kind of indicated, talked about it almost in a community setting. Liz is trying to create an environment in which, you know, we can be sensitive to it. Perhaps something even, you know, somebody who recruits consultants, I often barely acknowledge that they've got feelings and emotions, but it has been an incredibly tough time mentally for staff as well, hasn't it?
I think you're right. I think this is hit patients, and I think one of the things that distresses me is I can provide treatments. I mean, we, you know, through the pandemic, we adapted very rapidly once we knew the problem, and we grounded our feet, and some of the smoke had cleared. We got our systems in process. You know, as I said before, people taking out tablets, giving patients longer tablets, and doing more phone calls. The thing I felt very impotent about, and actually very sort of lost and, you know, slightly distressed about, was the loneliness. I knew I had these patients sitting at home, some women who had incurable disease, who couldn't see their grandkids or their families because they're at risk. So how do you make that better? There are no easy answers. You can talk to patients, and lots of our nurses picked up the phone outside of their hours and spoke to patients. We had one of my members of staff who does assessments of patients, but she was phoning some of our elderly patients just for a chat because they were lonely. So we had those instances where members of staff just did the right thing, was pick up the phone and have a chat. But I can't do anything about that. I can't make better a grandmother who can't see her grandkids. All I can do is empathise, listen, and I think that's one of the important things that we sometimes don't do enough of is just listen, not talk, just listen to people, because often people just want to talk, they just want to be heard, and they just want to know somebody's there. But that's what I've really struggled with, is this knowing that I've got people who are lonely, and that's really sad. And the government advice was to shield. So and I don't have an easy answer. It's very, very difficult. But what we can do is be there, listen, and provide support. So we can provide physical support, getting Peter talked about food banks and getting food out to our most vulnerable members of society. There have been some really lovely projects around feeding the kids. Remember, we've got major issues with child poverty in this city. We've got bits of the city where kids are going out without food, and we've seen some real innovations with people doing deliveries. I mean, there's guys sending food out, setting up charities. So this city coming together and providing for the patient. So I think where we again and people phoning up, but the loneliness is something that I struggled with, and personally thinking that these patients are alone. And as consultants, as people, we also were worried. We've all got loved ones. We were dealing with a situation we were not sure what was going to happen, and at times it was stressful. But then where we got each other to talk to. I think humour is important. I think sometimes you just need to step back and be able to laugh a bit as well, and just because that's often helpful. But I think being able to talk, and mental health is a real issue, both in the general public and in our hospitals. And remember, we've got staff. I mean, Clatterbridge is very lucky because we're a cancer hospital and we're to a degree protected, but we've got colleagues in the Royal who have been badly hit. They've been under sustained pressure from this virus for a number of months, and they're back under pressure at the moment. So we also need to think about them. And again, the society and the city gave back to the NHS. We had food and gifts and all sorts coming in to support the staff, and that was really welcome. So we also really we're grateful for that support from the city to the NHS and colleagues widely. So again, that was much appreciated.
Lovely, thank you, Carl. I think with it being a business opportunity, we're just on 5:30, but I thought I'd give the last word to Peter. And maybe, Peter, given that the way that Liz and Carla have led us, perhaps just something about you seem relatively calm and unflappable. Your legs may be shaking under that computer there, but maybe just something about resilience. Is there anything you've learned or something positive and uplifting to end what's been, I think, a very positive conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the old expression, this too shall pass, and it will. We'll get through all of this. A vaccine eventually will be widely globally available, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after. This too shall pass. I think what happens then is, what have we learned? Again, I don't want to talk about recent defeats, but they're only of any value if you learn something from them. And if we learned to interact with each other in a very different way, a more productive way, I do worry enormously about the mental health. Globally, billions of people are not being able to live their normal lives and not see people, not see their families. So we need to have solutions for that. And as a community here, this is one of the more resilient communities in the world. We've been through so much. I lived here in the 60s. It was a tough place. I just saw Tim's message on the chat there. A fellow Wool and a fellow Sefton General baby on Smithdown Road, now the Asda, and a similar background to me. Scousers are everywhere. We like to think we're missionaries, and we travel the world and spread the Liverpool, the Scousness. And I recently, about a year ago, did a TED talk here in Liverpool about the power of being Scouse and all of the attributes the people of this city are born with. And, you know, having lived through here in tough times, you think of the 80s and you think of managed decline, you think of the Toxteth riots, you think of everything we've been through as a city, and then you walk the waterfront, you walk the city today. That is absolute resilience. This is a magnificent city with magnificent people, and we owe it to them to give them all the help they can to get through things, what we're getting through right now. We as business leaders are part of the solution. And my message would be is once we get through this is embrace what we have, magnificent hospitals. The Royal, eventually the new Royal will open, and you think of that area now that you will have, and think of what that benefit it will have for your businesses going forward here. Again, not this year, maybe not in this decade, but going forward here, a healthy, wealthy society is good for everybody. And having places like Clatterbridge Cancer Centre right in the middle of our city can only be good, and we owe it to them to help them.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Peter. And I apologise for slightly overrunning, but I thought it was a really good conversation. I'd really like to thank our panellists, Peter, Carlo and Liz. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. I can see quite a few questions, of course, coming in now that time's up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd just like to thank everyone for their participation. Hopefully you got a lot out of it, and a big thanks to our panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Safe journey, Peter.
Thank you, Liz. On your
Bye.
end.
Okay, do we come off now?
I'm just thinking, I don't know, does Alex, do we do anything? Or can we leave?